The wind is gentle tonight. It brushes through the tall grass like an old friend leaning in to whisper secrets from a colder time. You stand at the edge of a fjord, the sky above stretched in watercolor layers of twilight-faded blue melting into the sleepiest gray. There's the distant cry of a seabird, lonely and half-hearted, like it forgot what it was squawking about halfway through. Norway, probably. Or Denmark. Honestly, no one is entirely sure which coastline this is. The lines on the map back then were more like vague suggestions than hard borders. If you like drifting into the past, if historical tangents soothe your modern nerves, gently press that like button. Maybe even subscribe. We're always wandering into weirder centuries. But that S, the beauty of it. You don't need GPS to get cozy by a Viking hearth. Your boots crunch softly against the damp earth. Somewhere behind you, a small cluster of Viking longhouses creaks in the breeze. Thin smoke trails slip from their turf-covered roofs, vanishing into the falling night. You're not alone, but you may as well be nobody. Here is in a hurry. Least of all you, or possessed by wind spirits. Depending on who you ask, and how loud the goats are bleating that day. Fish for energy. Fish for fever. Fish. Fermented herring that has been buried for 3 weeks in a wooden barrel sealed with moss and animal fat. If your body was cold, you needed hot things. Onion stew, fire-heated mead, or a full-body sweat bath inside a smokehouse that smelled suspiciously like roasted mutton. She calls it surströmming. You call it an insult to the gods. Tonight, you've slipped quietly into the 9th century. The healer hums as she pours water over heated stones. You're still sick, but you don't care. There's a sleepy sort of peace in knowing nobody else has it figured out either. The room fills with hissing clouds, and your nose fills with herring and pine resin. Somewhere in this murky sauna, your fever either breaks or gets politely ignored. Before we dig into the rich, strange, occasionally pungent world of Viking medicine and cuisine, let's whisper a small, sleepy reminder. And while your eyes grow heavier, tell us, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? You do not want to know how they harvested it. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You're hungry, but not in the usual way. One bite, and you feel your humors abandoning ship. Your stomach churns. Your forehead glistens with a fever that's been lingering since yesterday's storm. You'd blame the undercooked lamb if you hadn't watched your neighbor Einor sneeze directly into the communal stew pot. The healer well. She says, she's a healer takes. One look at you. This, she insists, will balance your humors. Here's the thing about Viking medicine. It wasn't big on subtlety. You're either fine or cursed. But food was medicine. Garlic, onions, leek salt, crushed into pastes, They believed in hot and cold illnesses borrowed from Greek medical theory, by way of some very confused monks. First the fish, then the steam. Historians still debate whether these saunas were used more for health or for hiding from the in-laws. Possibly both. Odd fact of the night. Some Vikings used bear bile as a laxative. You lie back on the wooden bench. The warmth presses into your bones. You probably won't make it through this day. But don't worry, that's just how Viking Tuesdays go. The morning comes reluctantly, like a tired ox, dragging a cart through slush. You don't so much wake up as regain awareness through steam and regret. You'll live, she mutters, which is encouraging, though you're not entirely convinced. The sauna's cooled. Someone's draped a goat pelt over your shoulders. It smells better than the fish, at least. A woman sharpens a knife against a whetstone, her motions slow and deliberate. Nearby, two boys argue over the last dried apple slice from winter storage each, pretending they were in tea. The healer squints at you, chewing on something suspiciously root-shaped. Some historians call this a perpetual stew. Others just call it Tuesday. Not for the buzz jest to keep from dehydrating. Clean water's a luxury, especially when half the streams upstream are being used for washing animal intestines. It smells like snow and seaweed and wood smoke, and, under it all, that ever-present perfume of fish. You shuffle into the light. The air is sharp and brisk. You can taste salt in the wind. You try not to imagine which part of the wolf. She hands it to you in a tiny horn cup, with the solemnity of a priest administering communion. Survival wasn't about fine dining, it was about calories, community, and occasionally tricking your taste buds into cooperation. For breakfast, you get gruel. Again, oats, water, maybe some goat milk, shouting at the troll until it ran back down, loudly. That's probably the Viking equivalent of a 5-star Yelp review. In public, she's feeding a goat some herbs, or maybe the goat's feeding on her herb stash. It's unclear who's in charge. There's weaving to do, boats to patch, gossip to whisper while pretending to stir the cauldron. You swear it winked at you. She motions for you to come closer. You chew slowly, watching steam rise from the wooden bowl like it's trying to escape. A sprinkle of dried berries gives the illusion of variety. And still, it's not bad. Warm, filling, the kind of food that tells your stomach, here, your major historical fact for the morning. Viking meals were often cooked in a large communal pot. You sip some mead watered down with lukewarm spring water. The blacksmith's hammer starts up, clang, clang, pause, curse, repeat. Birds scatter from the thatched rooftops. You catch sight of the healer again? Apparently, it's time for your strengthening tonic. This one's made from fermented honey, crushed garlic, seaweed powder, and a whisper of wolf fat. It tastes like betrayal and old socks. But you smile anyway. By now, you've gathered. The Vikings weren't exactly picky eaters. Weird tidbit of the day? Some Viking folk believed hiccups were caused by a tiny invisible troll climbing up your throat. The remedy: you feel marginally better. Or maybe you're just getting used to the flavor of despair. Either way, you're upright. That's progress. The healer eyes you suspiciously, then nods once and walks away without a word. The rest of the village moves with quiet, measured rhythm. No one's in a rush. And through all of it, life hums along. Still sick. Still here. And the fish. Still waiting for dinner. The sky doesn't care how you feel. It drapes itself over the village in a heavy blanket of gray, as if trying to smother the very idea of sunlight. Somewhere out there is the open sea. Somewhere out there is freedom. But you're still here, wrapped in goat fur. You're handed a thick wooden ladle and told, somewhat ominously, to stir clockwise only. Apparently stirring widdershins invites misfortune, or possibly summons a sea serpent. It's communal memory in a broth. And occasionally, someone adds a leek, a bone, a handful of herbs or, in the case of young Bjorn yesterday, smelling faintly of garlic and shame. The way your feet are always slightly damp, even when it hasn't rained. Today's challenge is soup duty. Not glamorous, but it beats being volunteered to clean fish guts by torchlight. If Edible had a cousin who never bathes, but means well. As you approach the stew pot, you brace yourself. A boy, barely old enough to grow a convincing beard, hauls in a basket filled with glassy-eyed fish and glistening organs. He's beaming. Someone pats him on the back. You're pretty sure this is the highlight of his life so far. Fragrant, in the same way, old boots are technically fragrant. You take a bite. It coats your tongue in a silky film that may never wash off. But you feel stronger. Or at least less likely to pass out. Your nostrils have permanently adopted the scent of brine and bone. And still, somehow, you're content. It's food. It's medicine. It's something to rub into sore joints when you've wrestled one too many sheep. She scoops several into a wooden basin and begins chanting softly, probably, though she could just be complaining about her back. It's been simmering for what might be years. No one really remembers what went into it originally. Some say rabbit. High in iodine and shockingly nutritious, seaweed helped keep goiters away. The answer, as with most things Viking, seems to be whichever didn't kill them. Which is great, because nothing ruins a perfectly good raiding party like unexpected neck swelling. Others claim it started as soup and evolved into a separate life form. You poke the surface. Something It may have been an onion or a toe. Despite its murky origins, the stew is important. It's shared by all. It's comfort food. Today's historical fact: Vikings regularly added kelp and seaweed to their dishes. You stir dutifully, clockwise, watching the steam rise in slow, lazy tendrils. Edible, kind of. You think about home, wherever that is. The quiet creak of the longhouse at night. The way the furs keep slipping off your shoulders. And just when the day starts to blur into a comfortable fog of monotony, someone yells. Loud, urgent, uncomfortably enthusiastic. Cod liver delivery. The village erupts into chaotic motion. This is a big deal. Cod liver is liquid gold. You rush over, mostly out of curiosity. The healer, as always, appears from nowhere. She plucks a liver from the pile and sniffs it, nods, approves. Now, here. A weird cultural tidbit. Some Viking communities believed that eating raw cod liver on the winter solstice would make you dream of your ancestor sand. Sometimes your ancestors would critique your fishing technique. You're handed a small bowl, warm cod liver stew, thick, oily. Historians still debate whether Vikings preferred their liver cooked, dried, or simply endured. The day wears on. You finish soup duty. Your ladle hand cramps. Evening arrives, wrapped in mist. You sit near the hearth, belly full of fishy resilience, eyelids heavy. Someone plays a lyre. Someone snores. You lean back against the logs, and the world exhales. Sleep doesn't come gently. It ambushes you mid-thought, like a wolf in tall grass. You don't dream so much as tumble through half-memories. A goat with human eyes. The stew whispering your name. A cod liver judging you silently from a wooden plate. You wake to rain. Not a storm. Just a lazy drizzle soaking everything with quiet purpose. It patters on the longhouse roof. It's better dunked in broth. But then again, what isn't? The chickens, somehow always damp, cluck around your ankles. One pecks your boot like it owes her money. It runs down your cheeks as you step outside, blinking into another wool-colored morning. Breakfast today is barley hard, dry, the kind of thing you could use to shingle a roof in a pinch. You chew slowly, watching puddles form in the mud. And then comes the smell. Not stew. Not fish. Something ... worse. The healer is fermenting shark. Not even because anyone wants to eat it. Taste. She offers, holding out a piece that looks like cheese and smells like betrayal. Just because it's good for clearing out spiritual blockages, she says. A pleasant enough task if you enjoy squinting at moss and arguing with bees. You find wild garlic, thyme, nettle. All staples in Viking kitchens and healing brews. You even spot a patch of Angelica prized medicinal plants said to fight off plague, fatigue, and boredom. You're not sure what that means, but the odor suggests something definitely got cleared out. When it returns, it brings a note that reads, "Why?" Then spend the next hour trying to scrape your tongue with a birch twig. You breathe it in and feel something settle in your chest. Not wellness exactly, but dot 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 belonging. The bravery, presumably, came from surviving the experience. Here's your historical fact, or fermented shark, was a delicacy in Norse Greenland. The process involved burying the shark underground for months, then drying it for weeks. The result? A chewy, ammonia-rich bite that smells like a public bathhouse. Lost a bet. She catches your eye. You take the tiniest bite. Your soul leaves your body for several seconds. You thank her politely. Weird tidbit. Vikings believed certain foods could increase bravery. You're assigned to herb collection. You wander the damp forest, a satchel slung over your shoulder. Historians still debate how widely Angelica was used, or if its healing reputation was mostly folklore wrapped in good intentions. Probably. As the rain lightens, the world smells greener, earthier. You head back to the village. Satchel full, boots muddy, mind calmer than it's been in days. Dinner is simple tonight. Barley porridge with leeks. The shark is mercifully gone. You sit by the fire again. A child asks you if the stew can talk. You don't have the heart to say yes. Another day survived. Another meal swallowed. Another bizarre remedy endured. And somehow, you feel just a little stronger. The wind howls louder tonight, but not in a threatening way. More like it's practicing a lullaby in a language it forgot. Each time you wake, the world feels slower, heavier, as if even time has caught a chill and decided to take things easy. You lie under thick pelts, listening to the rhythmic creak of the longhouse beams. You climb the wooden ladder, careful not to slip. The loft smells sweet and sharp. Lavender, mugwort. It's hard to tell. Outside, the rain returns soft. Persistent, determined to soak every wooden cart. You drift in and out of sleep. When morning finally nudges you upright, you find a gift at your feet. A bowl of sour milk porridge. It's ... warmish. You eat it without question. That's the Viking way. Your chore today is surprisingly pleasant, helping dry herbs in the loft above the longhouse. The healer joins you, sorting stalks with practiced hands. The air up here feels thinner. Or maybe it's the dried mugwort playing tricks. She hums a tune older than the timber holding this place together. You eat with the others in silence, watching sparks drift from the hearth to the rafters. You've spent the day cradled in ritual, surrounded by plants with names like Bonebreaker and Dream Sifter. How bad can things be when you have a pouch full of moss that allegedly scares off spirits? You ask her what it means. She says, it's about a goat who stole a crown and became a king. The warmth of the fire below rises up, curling the air like lazy smoke. Time stretches. Here's your major historical fact. Viking Age healers were often women, and many doubled as spiritual guides, or practitioners of Sira, form of Norse sorcery, involving trance. In short, they were multitaskers with serious vibes. You hang herbs on twined lines, watching their shadows dance on the roof beams. 4 wounds, she says, then adds, and for dreams you want to forget. That second part feels less comforting. Weird tidbit of the day. Some Norse warriors would chew yarrow before battle, not just for pain relief but because they believed it helped them see. The last face they would ever see more clearly. Charming. You ask if she thinks the herbs really work. They work better when you believe they might. And even better if you sing to them. Historians still debate how much Norse medicine was practical science versus carefully decorated guesswork. Spoiler. Probably a bit of both. By midday, your fingers are green-stained, your nose filled with 1,000 conflicting scents, and your head just a little lighter than usual. You descend from the loft, feeling something akin to peace. Dinner is dried fish on rye, flatbread chewy, salty, defiantly bland, or pain, or the ever-mysterious stew. Just herbs, and shadows, and sleep. You wake 2 goats screaming. Not bleeding screaming. Like they've been told. Taxes are being introduced. You stumble outside, still half wrapped in your pelt. Turns out, one of the goats found the healer's fermented onion stash and is now questioning its life choices behind the grain shed. You feel surprisingly good today. A little achy, but no fever. No dreams of talking fish. That counts as progress. Breakfast is oat cakes. You tear off pieces and dip them into sour berry jam, which someone insists and still claims to be cold. She's all elbows and muttering high praise. She slaps a bit of it onto your arm, uninvited. For learning, she says. You nod solemnly. That is indeed how you learn things now. She hands you a mortar and pestle without a word and starts sorting jars like a squirrel preparing for a particularly emotional winter. Today's assignment: help with salve making. You're paired with Torvi, the only villager who wears 3 scarves. The mixture begins to melt over the fire. It smells earthy, slightly minty, and a little like regret. Probably wise. You crush dried comfrey root while she measures beeswax with an intensity most people reserve for duels. But it smells like something that could... and just a little waxy. Mostly. Historical fact. The Vikings used salves made from animal fat mixed with herbs like plantain, comfrey, and thyme to treat wounds, burns, and chapped skin. Fat was the base. Herb was the hope. You stir slowly, watching the mixture thicken into a pale golden goo. Weird tidbit. Some Norse cures included singing into a wound to coax the pain out. There's no evidence this worked, but it definitely made for an awkward conversation starter. You bottle the salve into horn tubes, seal them with cork, and label each with charcoal symbols that may or may not say ointment or do not eat. She sniffs a jar, licks her finger, and declares, "Better than last year." You didn't know you were competing with last year, but you'll take the win. You scrub them in a wooden basin filled with pine needle water. By afternoon, your hands smell like herbs and wax, and possibly wet wolf. Someone suggests testing the salve on a pig with a sore leg. The pig declines by fleeing into the hills. Dinner is root vegetable stew, thick with turnip, onion, and a mysterious orange thing someone claims is carrot. You don't ask questions, you're learning. As night falls, you sit by the fire, gently massaging your temples with the salve you helped make. The long house quiets. Outside, the goat has forgiven the onions. And you, under wool and sky, drift, tired, healed. You wake to silence. Not the peaceful kind, more like the suspicious kind, the kind that means something has gone wrong. You sit up and glance around. The hearth is cold, the goats are not screaming, and the healer is gone. That last one is especially concerning. You rise, stretching slowly, your joints making the kind of crackling sounds that suggest your bones have been fermenting alongside the fish. As you shuffle to the doorway, the morning mist greets you like a cold cloth to the face. Today, the village is preparing for the sacrificial feast. This isn't your everyday stew and pray affair. This is big. Ritual big. Into it goes lamb fat, wild onions, dried seaweed, and a splash of mead. Outside, there's activity, but not the usual sleepy routine. Here's your historical fact of the day. Vikings held to honor gods, spirits, and ancestors, often marking the change of seasons or important moments like harvests. Not the sacrifice part, that's reserved for people with stronger stomachs and less time to think, but the cooking part. It now smells like something your grandmother might call good for the lungs while forcing a spoonful down your throat. You choose not to ask. She nods at your broth, tastes it, and says, "Could use more ash." You nod back like that makes perfect sense. People gather in cloaks, their breath fogging in the chilly air. You watch the ceremonial offerings: bread, bones, a carved piece of cheese, and you sip carefully, the warmth curling through your chest. Torvi challenges you to a staring contest. You lose immediately. Specifically, you're on broth duty. Again, or at least not cursing anyone, which seems like a more achievable goal. Either way, they work tiff. Not for the gods, then at least for morale. These feasts could include food offerings, animal sacrifice, and a great deal of drinking. You chew slowly, wishing the bread were less ambitious. You blink blearily into the soft morning light. The long house smells of extinguished fire, old leather, and someone's mead-soaked breath. You kneel beside a fallen log and find a cluster of fungi white, frilly, suspiciously friendly looking. Torvi warned you. If it looks friendly, don't trust it. You leave it alone. You brush the dirt off and tuck them into your basket with something like pride. Still, you go through the motions. This is what healing looks like here: slow, manual, faintly pointless. She adds them to a thick stew with barley, dried beef, and a sprig of something that smells like licorice. The fly agaric bright, red with white spots was known, feared, and possibly used in shamanic trance ceremonies. Not exactly your everyday soup ingredient. Probably yours. You're handed a task before you can protest, helping to prepare the sacred meal. Life returns to its rhythm, slow, rough-edged, surprisingly gentle. You consider telling the healer this, but worry it will lead to hunting thunderstorms. Broken wooden bowls, bits of charred bread, and a sticky smear of berry syrup mark the battlefield. You head to the cauldron, a familiar sight now, its surface trembling. As you stir, clockwise. Always clockwise. The healer returns eventually, carrying bundles of sacred herbs and something in a pouch that weird cultural tidbit. During some Vikings would smear blood from the sacrifice on their homes and tools as a blessing. Scholars disagree on how widespread this was, or how often it ruined a perfectly nice set of wooden spoons. The broth turns gray. The smell improves, oddly enough. In truth, you know very little, but off you go, a basket in hand, boots squelching through moss. The feast begins at dusk. A bonfire crackles in the center of the village. It's hearty, smoky, slightly crunchy, in a way that probably wasn't intended. Because that's what you do here. Historians still debate how much of the rituals were religious versus simply communal tradition. Later, someone passes around fermented berries soaked in honey mead. You lie back in the grass, full and slightly dizzy, listening to the fire crackle and the quiet hum of songs you don't know the words to. Tonight, your head throbs like it hosted a midnight battle between a goat and a drum. Outside, the feast is over, but the cleanup has only just begun. You're handed a broom made from bound pine branches. It does not sweep so much as rearrange the dirt into new locations. Breakfast is leftover bread soaked in last night's stew. It tastes like smoke, meat, and regret. Then, a new task. Mushroom foraging. Apparently, your brief stint in herb drying has given you a reputation for knowing the land. The forest is cool and damp, muffled like it's wrapped in wool. Here's your historical fact. Vikings used certain mushrooms both for healing and, occasionally. Eventually, you find what you came for. Chanterelles. Golden, curled, earth. Weird tidbit. Some Viking-era communities believed mushrooms grew where lightning struck the ground. Back in the village, you clean the mushrooms with a damp cloth and patience. The healer watches with a nod. The stew is rich, savory, grounding, no herring. No surprise, shark, chunks, just mushroom. Historians still debate how much Viking diets varied by season and region. But one thing is clear, they knew how to stretch ingredients with creativity and grit. The afternoon drifts by. You help hang smoked fish, stack firewood, and shoo a raven out of the grain bin. You sit by the hearth again that night, fire flickering low. Someone plays a bone flute. Someone else hums along. The air smells like smoke and mushrooms. You wrap yourself in a pelt and let your eyes close. You feel full of food, of quiet, of something like purpose. The village wakes with a groan today. Not from illness, not from weather, but from the unmistakable weight of chores no one wants to do. Which means ladders, thatch bundles, and a very real risk of falling into someone's soup. The sky glares. The goat beneath you looks judgmental. The smell of dried grass, the distant clang of someone dropping a pot. The soft hum of a lullaby from a nearby house, it all settles around you like a warm blanket. You're handed a woven rope belt and pointed toward the eastern longhouse. The one with a roof that's been sagging like a wet mitten for weeks. Once on top, you kneel in the damp straw and begin weaving new thatch into the old. It's surprisingly meditative. These layers were insulated with soil and grass, which occasionally sprouted wildflower sore. Here's your historical fact. Viking longhouses had roofs made of turf, often built with overlapping birch bark for waterproofing. The rope bites your palms, but your mind drifts elsewhere. You tie another bundle in place. Evidence leans heavily toward the ladder. Below, the healer walks past, carrying a tray of boiled roots and something that may or may not be part of a reindeer. You eat near the fire, the warmth sinking deep into your tired muscles. You both agree to pretend it doesn't until spring. That feels like the Viking way. She doesn't look up. She doesn't have to. She knows you're up there, contemplating gravity. You can't help but smile. It's a good start. The healer needs it for sealing wounds and warding off the dumb spirit. She doesn't elaborate, which somehow makes it worse. The healer calls it morning strength. You call it surprisingly delicious. A hot drink made from birch sap, mint, and something the healer only calls courage drops. You drink it in one go. It tastes like minty tree bark. It's man. Whether this was spiritual or simply a romantic excuse for night walks is, as you can imagine. You scrape sap into a leather pouch using a bone blade, watching it glisten like amber. Sticky fingers. You hum a little as you work. That last one helped clean teeth, freshen breath, and possibly silence nosy relatives. And crushed marigold petals, and stirs with the kind of focus usually reserved for hexes or bread baking, which, in Viking terms, is basically a promotion. She dabs on pine salve, sings softly, and ties a scrap of wool around the leg. You feel something warm unfold in your chest. In practice, it was often both because when your best tools are fish, moss, and hope, you learn to blur the lines. The mixture is poured into small clay pots. She labels them with runes scratched into bone chips. Lunch today is eaten on the roof a wedge of barley cake, a smear of curdled cheese, and dried apples. You chew thoughtfully while watching a bird try and fail to land gracefully on the smoke vent. You eat in silence, the firelight flickering on clay bowls and tired hands. Weird tidbit. Some Norse households believed that birds nesting in your roof beams were a sign of good luck unless, in which case, someone in the house was about to owe a god a favor. The sky darkens early. You climb down just as the drizzle begins. Your knees crack like old floorboards. Historians still debate how medicinal drinks were dosed, whether precise measurements were followed, or if it was more of a pinch of this, splash of that, and a prayer situation. Dinner is simple: toina roasted carrots, dried venison, and a barley mash that tastes slightly of last week's smoke. Torvi sits beside you, grumbling about the roof still leaking. The flames crackle. The wind settles. And beneath the repaired roof, you sleep, dry, exhausted, and only a little itchy from the straw. Today begins with laughter deep, bellyful, contagious. Someone has accidentally worn their tunic inside out, and now the entire village treats them like a wayward jester. Breakfast is goat milk, warmed with cinnamon bark and a pinch of crushed nuts. You're sent to the forest again, this time not for herbs or mushrooms, but for resin. Pine sap, specifically. You walk under tall trees, the air damp and resinous. Historical fact for the day. Pine resin was widely used in Viking medicine as antiseptic, adhesive, and even chewing gum. A squirrel throws a pine cone at your head. You consider it an initiation. Back in the village, the healer melts the resin over coals. Adds ash. Weird tidbit. Some Viking Age healers believed that applying salve under moonlight increased its strength. You help carry the salves to the supply hut, passing the blacksmith, sharpening a curved blade while humming something suspiciously like a lullaby. Lunch is flatbread with dried herring and juniper paste. It tastes like salt, citrus, and regret. You eat all of it. You're learning. In the afternoon, you watch the healer tend to a child's scraped knee. The healer looks at you sideways and mutters, "You're not bad at this." Historians still debate the extent to which Norse healing was rooted in observation versus superstition. That night, dinner is lentil and leek stew vegetarian, accidentally. Someone forgot to defrost the salted pork. No one complains. Outside, the forest hums. Inside, the salve cools. And under the soft weight of your own breath, you sleep again scented faintly of pine. There's frost on the ground this morning. Not enough to crunch beneath your boots, but just enough to nip at your cheeks like a disapproving ant. The kind who smells like pickled herring and judges your posture. You bundle into your cloak and step outside. The air smells of wood smoke, damp moss, and something faintly sweet. You follow your nose and find it. The baker's hut, where someone is attempting honey cakes. She says it's chest season, when everyone suddenly remembers they have lungs and start complaining about them. You're handed one? It's dense, slightly burnt, and somehow still sticky in the middle. Hot drinks weren't just comfort, they were strategy. You eat it in 2 bites. It tastes like a memory of cake, passed down 3 generations and filtered through ambition. You love it. Today, the healer wants your help preparing for winter illness. Each goes into a pouch tied with twine, labeled in charcoal scribble. Others just have a tiny fish drawn on them. You don't ask. That's the closest thing to optimism she's offered in weeks. The scent is warm, grassy, almost lemony. You sip. It tastes like old sun and quiet strength. You can see why the healer loves it. Your task. Make herbal infusions, soft and steaming, designed to coax out phlegm. The answer is probably yes. People. Thank you. Some slip you berries. One gives you a carved button shaped like a pig. You don't know why. You accept it anyway. So, always ask your tea permission before you brew it. Here's your historical fact. Vikings brewed teas from herbs like thyme, elderflower, nettle, and angelica to treat colds and respiratory infections. You feel the same. Your dreams were strange last night. Something about a stew that spoke in riddles and asked for payment in turnips. The healer's hut is filled with rows of split cod, glistening and grimacing. The smell is intense. As always equal parts, the healer throws you a rag and a slice of sour bread. Don't eat with that hand, she advises. You take it to heart. It's a dark, hot, creaky place that smells like every meal ever cooked in it. It's not exciting, but it goes down easy and doesn't look at you first. You hang the fish, close the door, and leave it to become future food. Stockfish, a dried cod, was a staple-ite, durable, and lasting for months. It was the granola bar of the north. You start with dried elderflower, pouring hot water over the pale blossoms and letting them steep. You grind willow bark into powder, mix it with warm water and crushed nettle, and wrap it in a wool scrap. The patient doesn't scream. Victory. Weird tidbit. In some Norse tales, elder trees were thought to house spirits, especially Huldrefo, mischievous forest beings who would curse anyone who cut the tree without permission. You just know it works better than chewing on sadness. You mix other blends, chamomile and mint, sage and yarrow, dried berries with a hint of ash bark. By mid-afternoon, your hands are stained green. Your sleeves smell like thyme. You've become a walking brew yourself. The healer nods. If the village doesn't cough itself inside out this winter, we'll thank the nettles. It keeps the fish respectful, he says. You believe him. Mostly because the fish does seem unusually still. Lunch is a hot drink and leftover lentil mash, reheated with garlic and wild onions. It tastes far better than it has any right to. Later, you carry the finished tea pouches to each house. Historians still debate whether Viking medical knowledge was passed down through formal apprenticeships. Yell at a goat while brewing tea. That night, you sip a steaming blend of nettle and mint by the fire, and as you listen to the wind rattle the shutters, you feel grateful for every leaf, root, and accidental cure that got you through another day. The sun rises reluctantly, dragging itself over the treetops, like it had too much mead and not enough motivation. Today begins with fish. Not for breakfast, thankfully, but for preservation. You're handed a knife and shown how to scrape, clean, and salt the fish for winter storage. It's messy work, but rhythmic. Historical fact. Vikings preserved fish using salting. You work alongside a man named Jardin, who insists on humming dirges. Your sleeves get soaked, your knife hand cramps. Weird tidbit. In some Norse households, the smell of rotting fish was believed to ward off evil spirits. Historians suspect this was mostly a convenient excuse. After hours of salting and stacking, you help carry the racks of drying cod to the smoking shed. Lunch is cold barley mash with a sliver of cured pork. Later, the healer lets you help with a poultice for someone's swollen ankle. Historians still debate how often painkillers like willow bark were used medicinally. The evening is quiet. The stew simmers gently. You hear laughter through the walls. You sit by the fire, watching flames curl like slow thoughts. You smell like fish. But you feel like someone who's beginning to understand the strange language of healing. And when sleep comes, it arrives without asking. Just settles in beside you like it's always belonged. The longhouse groans with the cold. Not the sharp kind, but the deep kind. The kind that seeps into the wood. Somewhere nearby, a spoon has frozen to someone's hand. The healer meets you at the door with a grim smile and a frozen bucket. Time to render fat, she says, as if announcing a birthday party. Again. The fat melts down with a rich, heavy scent. That's equal parts comfort and challenge. Torvi pops in to remind you not to look directly into the pot. If it blinks, walk away. You don't ask. You're bundled into every woolen layer available, looking more sheep than person. But for lighting, waterproofing, and occasionally rubbing onto exposed skin to survive icy winds. Think lotion meets survivalist barbecue. Rendering fat is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. Like patience, chunks of animal, tallow beef, pork, even sea lard chopped, melted slowly over fire. You stare at it for longer than you meant to. The room seems to soften around it. The result? Clean, semi-liquid gold, used in cooking, healing, candle making. The cold waits just outside, but inside, it's warm enough to dream. Here's your historical fact. Vikings rendered fat into smire and fichu. Both essential not just for survival. It was hospitality in its most unsettling form. You stir the pot slowly. Not a blizzard, not a flurry, just a steady, whispering fall that coats the longhouse roof. You step outside and everything is hushed, as if the world pressed a finger to its lips. You take a moment to sit in the open air, the wind biting your cheeks like a reminder that nature is, or garlic. It changes depending on her mood. Congratulations. The bread softens. It tastes like every warm meal you've ever needed. Long simmered, often overnight. It was used as both food and medicine, especially for the weak, the wounded, and the very tired. She doesn't say what it protects against. You decide to wear it anyway. Inside, warm milk, barley, and honey. Perfect. Like someone ladled up the concept of peace. Either way, it feels good to have something small and purposeful in your pocket. The healer adds a pinch of rosemary to one, a smear of ash to another. You nod. You don't entirely know what that means, but it sounds like something you're ready for. For smell, she mutters, and protection, and maybe the mice will hate it. The longhouse is full of soft noises, snoring, slurping, someone whispering a story to a half-asleep dog. They go into a massive pot with water, herbs, root vegetables, and what looks suspiciously like yesterday's porridge. You stir slowly. The broth darkens with each hour, the air filling with a savory fog. She takes 3 full scoops, slurps loudly, and declares it almost edible. You take it as a compliment. Weird tidbit. Some Norse folk believed that burning fat on specific nights, especially if the fat came from animals you de-raised yourself. You strain the hot liquid into clay pots, trying not to spill or burn yourself. After hours of work, your hands are greasy, your face flushed, and your boots suspiciously sticky. Lunch is bread fried in rendered pork fat, topped with pickled cabbage. It tastes like winter survival. In the afternoon, the healer hands you a candle made from today's tallow. Still soft. It burns slow, she says. You light it at dusk. The flame is low and golden, The smell is earthy, faintly sweet. Historians still debate whether the calming effects of firelight in Viking homes were intentional. You fall asleep that night with the candle still glowing beside you. It flickers. Snow arrives in the night. You walk carefully, boots crunching over powder. The healer stands near the fire pit, cradling a steaming bowl. She hands it to you without a word. Today, she says, is bone broth day. A good one, she claims, for clearing out the old, for rebuilding strength. You begin with the bone steer cow, or some fresh, some aged. Historical fact. Bone broth was a staple in Viking cuisine, prized for its nutrients, flavor, and versatility. Torvi wanders over with a bowl and asks if she can test the flavor. Weird tidbit. Viking warriors believed broth made from bones of wild animals passed on their strength. It wasn't just nourishment, it was transformation. As the broth simmers, the healer makes you stack wood again. She says, warmth is half the medicine. The other half is broth, or sleep. Lunch is a bowl of the broth, finally ready, poured hot. In the quiet of the afternoon, the healer teaches you how to make a healing amulet, just twine, bone, and a few dried herbs wrapped tightly in leather. Historians still debate whether these talismans had specific meanings or were simply gestures of comfort and superstition. The snow thickens as the sky fades. The fire crackles low. You curl up near the wall, a bowl of broth in your hands, steam fogging your eyelashes, and for once, your body doesn't ache. Your breath is steady. You drift, heavy, grounded, warm, as if made of bone, broth, and memory. You wake before the sun, not because anything is wrong, but because the quiet is just too perfect. You wrap yourself in your cloak, rise slowly, and step outside. Smoke rises in slow ribbons from chimneys, curling into the pale gray sky. You exhale, and your breath ghosts out ahead of you like a spirit on a walk. It's the kind of stillness that only snow can bring, a padded, echoless hush that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. The long house is dark, the fire little more than glowing embers. The village is blanketed in snow. Not a footprint in sight. Roofs sag under the white weight. Today, the healer says, is for rest. Past the tree where someone hung a charm against sore throats. Along the creek that now runs sluggish beneath a thin crust of ice. For reflection. You've earned it. The stew simmers. Even the goat that ate a pouch of thyme and now believes it's immortal. A fire burns low in the center. The healer hands you a warm stone to hold. For the hands, she says, and the heart. Beams creaking gently like old friends shifting in their sleep. Just the soft rhythm of resting wood, resting bones, resting time. The fire, now quiet. You're sent to the edge of the forest, not for chores this time, but for something softer. Take the air, she says. Let your bones remember the world, so you walk. through snow that squeaks beneath your boots. Maybe even a ghost of cod liver, though you've made peace with that. Here's your final historical fact. Winter in Viking life wasn't just about surviving the cold. It was about storing strength, slowing down, healing, feasting. Yes, but also storytelling. A.J. Hopsnear pecks the snow and ignores you entirely. It was a time to become human again, not just a worker of the land. You sit on a log and sip hot elderflower tea from a horn cup. That's practically a badge of honor. Weird tidbit. Some Norse folk believed that the first snowfall of the year contained whispers from the god Sif. You might hear advice, warnings, or a really specific recipe for elk sausage. You think about the first day you arrived here. The soup, the cod liver, the strange sleep-talking stew, and somehow you've made it through. Warrior of tea leaves and turnip. Not gracefully, not always willingly, but you're still here. You return to the longhouse as dusk begins to fall. You sit. Someone strums a lyre. Someone else hums a song without words. The shadows flicker. And as the flame dances low, your eyelids do the same. So now you lie there, beneath wool and woven stories. Your breath soft, your thoughts slower than the snow outside. The long house breathes with you. You feel the day retreating, like waves pulling slowly back into the sea. The smells around you are familiar now. Pine, smoke. You remember the herbs hanging above, the strange remedies, the half-believed charms, the hands you worked beside in the cold, the voice that hummed while mixing salve and stories. And now, your own breath falls into that rhythm. Slow, steady. You learned. You may have smelled strange most of the time, but in the Viking world. So rest now. Let the night carry you, as gently as a snowflake falling on fur. And if the stew talks again tonight, tell it you're off duty. Sleep well.